Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, welcome to the February 7th edition of Basis Loaded with Joe Schmit. I am Joe Schmit. This episode, as always, is produced by Paige Driscoll with the help of Ever Ag Insights. What we do here is break down the latest NDPSR report. We'll start this week with butter. This butter number came in at 265.91. That is a plus 3.5 to the CME 1 week average of 262.30. 3.5 is above average basis. And at that elevated level, the manufacturer was able to move an extra 500,000 pounds. Volume here in the NDPSR coming in north of 4 million, 500,000 above our expected 3.5 million. 3.5 is higher than expected basis. And this is prior to the CME moving higher. So last week, the CME average was 277. We traded 8 loads at the CME at that elevated level. And it looks like the elevated sales at the CME went a long way to pull that weighted average basis up, coming in at 3.5 over. So all in all, for butter, I'd have to call this a win for the manufacturer on both price and volume. Up next is cheese. We'll start with the blocks. 154.36. That is a plus 6 to the CME 1 week average of 148.25. Now that 148.25 was a little bit of a downtick at the CME before moving significantly higher. Basis expanded on that downtick on the CME as the NDPSR went up just a little smidge on a lower relative CME benchmark. So the manufacturer was able to call good basis, and once again, as the NDPSR kind of consolidates in this low 50s area, volume has been struggling. This week, no exception. Only 10.2 million pounds reported on the NDPSR, so a disappointing volume relative to that nice sales price when compared to the CME benchmark. If you go back for 5 weeks, as the block market has been consolidating in this low 50s level, the manufacturer has had a hard time moving weight at this low 50s level. Buyers seem unimpressed with prices at that level. The CME, on the other hand, had different ideas and rallied almost 20 cents off of that low 50s level. So we were hurting in the low 50s. They decided to take the benchmark up close to 170 at the CME. It'll be interesting to see how buyer behavior turns out in the future at that elevated level. Next up is barrels, 150.80. That's a plus 5 to the CME 2 week average of 146.01. Again, we traded 24 loads at the CME last week at 154, so you have a fair amount of weight going in at an elevated level, and that'll pull that basis higher. However, even with that weight traded at the CME, volume again struggling, failing to meet the 13.5 million pound threshold for 5 weeks. So the barrel struggling a little bit, consolidating a little bit lower than the block. They call it this 148 to 151 level, moving minimal weight at that level. And this, of course, is the precursor to higher prices at the CME. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's the cheese market for you from time to time. The story in cheese here on the NDPSR, relatively decent basis on significantly lower than expected volume. Up next is whey, 43.93. That's another uptick, up from last week's NDPSR print of 43.62, and even a premium to the prior week's NDPSR of 43.84. So we're talking about premiums everywhere. When you compare that 43.93 this week to the CME 1 week average of 41.31, you're talking about a 2.5 cent basis premium. We traded 3 loads on the CME last week, so not a lot of weight there to shake things up. The fact that the manufacturer was able to call a premium north of 43.84, that January 20th level, is impressive. And the fact that they were able to sell north of 4.5 million pounds, coming in at 4.757, impressive nonetheless. So the NDPSR whey approaches the 44 threshold. Of course, prices at the CME traded significantly higher than that before retreating rather abruptly. It's going to be really interesting to watch the NDPSR whey in the future and how buyers behave as they have to take on weekly increases in the NDPSR whey price. And then lastly, non-fat, 121.15. That's a plus 2.5 to the CME 1 week average of 118.69. We traded 9 loads at the CME last week and essentially a 123 level. And similar to cheese, that's a pretty nice basis, 2.5 over, but the manufacturer unable to move a lot of weight, selling just north of 15 million pounds, well below our expected 20 million pound threshold. So the manufacturer having no trouble selling whey and butter based on the figures that we're seeing on this report. However, cheese and non-fat appears to be having a tougher slog, a tougher go of it as prices trend higher. So this is week 1 of the February 4-week pricing cycle, currently getting a February class 3 of 1611 with February class 4 all the way up at 1985. If you carry current CME equivalents out through the 5-week March pricing cycle, currently getting March class 3 1670 and that March class 4 right at that 1980 level. So we'll see what they have in store for us in the weeks to come. Until then, on behalf of Paige and the entire EverAg Insights team, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye.